Scott. This week we're kicking it old school. We're checking out Zool Redimensioned. This week, we're throwing it back to 1992, and we're checking out Zool Redimensioned. I mean, Zool originally came out in 1992, but we're checking out the new version, Redimensioned. This one's an action platformer that plays as retro as all those old platformers do. Actually, a couple weeks ago, I played a retro platformer that was a lot like Mario, so this kind of gave me those same kinds of feels. But honestly, I had a great time jumping into this one, kind of just right off the bat. I like these retro games, or these kind of reimagined retro games, because back in the 80s and 90s, platforming games were tough. Like, they were hard, they were unforgiving, they were relentless, and they've managed to do a good job at bringing these games kind of into the modern era, right? Because we need to change stuff. We can't just keep it old school all the way, but let's keep as much nostalgia in there as we can, but kind of give us a better experience overall. We were playing this game on Steam. What did you think kind of jumping into Zool Redimensioned?
Well, I totally agree with you. There's something of the platformers of old that just hasn't quite been recaptured.
Yeah.
Mario has considerably gone, all the way to today, but it will always be around, but it's still not the same feeling as it was back before.
Yeah.
And I'm not exactly an expert on older platformers. The latest one I played was Celeste. That is not an old platformer by any means. But before that, I'm thinking Sonic. But I get into this game, and it is certainly not Sonic. It is kind of modeled after those of old. In fact, it is one of old, but it just doesn't quite have the speed behind it that you would be expecting if you were a fan of Sega in that same time frame. But that being said, I got into it with an open mind, and it did not disappoint. I'll get into that further, but the aesthetic of it was interesting.
I really enjoyed the retro look. They did a good job at kind of bringing those graphics into 2021. I mean, these games weren't overly, intricate or very detailed, to begin with. This game's kind of got the retro mode that we can jump back into, which is really, really cool to be able to kind of experience the game and what it was like back in 1992. But to be able to play it, in the redimensioned graphics and just kind of the newer gameplay style, I did really enjoy my playthrough. I mean, we've got 28 different levels to go through here with a bunch of different bosses. I mean, this game was tough. I didn't, you could speed run it, if you played this game before, if you go through and you beat it, you can kind of go back and speed run it if you'd like. But it is one of those games where multiple playthroughs will kind of give you a different results, because there are secret areas in each world that you may have passed over when your first playthrough. So there's a lot of kind of cool little details here that you don't necessarily see right at face value, but the more you do play this game, you do realize there's a lot of things to collect here. There's a lot of parts of these maps to check out. And one of the big things I dislike in retro platformers is when you start scrolling across the screen, normally that screen doesn't allow you to go backwards at all. But in Zool, you can, and I like that, because every once in a while you miss something you wanted to get, and you can go back and get it. And a lot of those other games are a lot more unforgiving in that sense, where if you passed it, it's gone, and you got to go start that level over again if you want to try to get it. So I did really like that. I thought they did a good job here. The controls overall were fairly basic. I played on controller on PC. I thought the controls were laid out really nicely. Did you play on keyboard and mouse?
I played, it was just keyboard, but it was kind of a little strange to me. It had the WASD, but you could also alternatively use the arrow keys.
Okay.
And then to jump was spacebar. That's pretty straightforward. But then there's the crouch, which is shift or down. Mm-hmm. And then you can shoot your little weapon. And that was control or shift on the other hand. So it's working for a left hand or a right hand option, and that was just a little bit confusing to me because they were both available, and in the panic moment I kind of hit it. And there was those panic moments, because as you go through this game, it's not terribly challenging if you're normally a gamer, but you get to these boss fights, and some of them actually did have some kind of hold up to it, where it took me a few tries to really get the hang of it or know when I could attack. But sometimes when you get down to that last little fraction of their health bar, man, you just panic out sometimes, and that was the difficulty that came with it. I feel like the controls were part of that.
Yeah, you know what? I did really enjoy the boss fights the most out of everything. Like, some of the levels I found to be short. Like, you could run through a couple of these levels pretty quickly to get to the end checkpoint and then move on to the next level. I found the boss levels actually slowed me down from advancing into the next world every time, because they did ramp the difficulty up quite a bit on the boss battles, but they did a good job because each boss had its kind of own unique set of moves that you had to learn. And, you know, as they went on, as you got through this into the later worlds, these bosses got pretty tough. I mean, the overall levels became more difficult as you got farther into the game as well, but the boss battles were unforgiving. I mean, there was some frustration on my part, I'm not gonna lie. I put it down for a little bit and then kind of jump back in, but there isn't a ton of playtime here, especially if you do kind of have an affinity for these, you know, action style platformers, where you can run through these levels pretty fast if you want to, especially if you know how to kind of maneuver around them. You can get through them fairly quickly, so I could see speedrunning being a big thing for this game. But overall, I mean, I don't have many complaints. I just had a really good time. This game doesn't promise to be anything it's not. You know, I was in it for about three and a half hours total. And I mean, you can go back and play through. There's kind of a Super Ninja mode that takes out your double jump and returns you to kind of the retro controls. And that really ramps up the difficulty. Damage is higher. I mean, it's a lot harder. I mean, if you're looking for that challenge, it's there, but the original game playthrough I thought was done really well. All right, Scott, we've run through these worlds like crazy, you know, being the ninja that Zool is. I think we had a pretty good time. If you've got to score this 1 out of 10, what are you going to give it?
I really appreciate this game taking something older and kind of brushing it off, putting it back into the new age. I think this one actually hit well. As a platformer, I'm not so familiar with, but it was friendly enough for a first timer that I got really in. And I can see that the ceiling is quite high for it as well. I like the aesthetic behind it. Maybe that's because it's from the 90s, I'm not sure. But in any case, I did like this one. I'm there with a 7.5.
You know what? I had a great time with this game too. I think the overall graphic style, bringing that into the 2021, we got the music. I just, you know, it makes you feel like a kid again, like we're playing on the old consoles. So just for that alone, I got to give this one some points. But overall, I just had a ton of fun. I think it's, like you said, good for beginners all the way up to advanced. Everybody should check this one out if you got some free time. I got to give this one a 7.5 as well.
Zool Redimensioned is a great revisit of older style platformer games. It's short in length overall, but lots of speedrunning potential with this one.